This is episode 13 of the Feed Your Soul with Kim podcast. Today we talk about the why and how of mindfulness as we continue on with our series on mindfulness. Today we discuss why mindfulness is important in your everyday life and we'll go in depth with many mindful techniques. Even if you practice mindfulness, you want to listen to develop even more mindfulness skills. Let's get started. This is the Feed Your Soul with Kim podcast, and I am Kim McLaughlin, your host. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, inspirational coach, speaker, and best-selling author. I help people feed their soul by putting food in its proper place as nourishment, and I help them develop functional ways to manage life and to keep themselves feeling really well and whole. Today we're talking about the why and how of mindfulness, and actually this is the third in a series that I didn't know we would do. Actually, when I started doing the podcast on mindfulness, it just seemed like there was more and more to talk about. So today is a continuation. The episode 11, we talked about what is mindfulness. In episode 12, we talked about what mindfulness is not. And today with episode 13, we talk about the why and how of mindfulness. They're really building upon each other. You can listen to them separately, but I'd suggest if you're listening to this one and you haven't heard the other two, go back to episode 11 and 12. Mindfulness is super important because it's one of the 6 core components that I talk about all the time with people when we're getting a handle on food and emotional eating and developing more of a wellness in our lives. There's the 6 components, as we've talked about before, are physical, emotional, mental, lifestyle, mindfulness, and self-love. And mindfulness is something that I think is a really core component that is really the reason why I've spent so much time talking about it. When we talked about it in the other episodes, we looked at mindfulness as really a moment-to-moment state awareness of our thoughts and feelings, bodily sensations, and the surrounding environment through a gentle, nurturing lens. That was one of the quotes that I've been using. And it's really about being present to what's really going on in the here and now moment. When we have issues with food or issues with emotions going on, it's often about the past or it's about the future. And it's not about what's going on in the current moment. And as we get more comfortable with being present in the current moment, we can actually be more present with what emotions are going on, what food are we eating, and what's going on in our lives around food that we're using food to really make ourselves feel better. I thought it would be helpful to start with the why we should be mindfulness. Why we should be mindful. Why? Because we can talk about the how, but if we don't buy into the why of it, you're just not necessarily going to want to do it. And it was interesting as I was looking at mindfulness and why it would be important. There came to be some 3 different categories of where mindfulness fits in that I think will help encourage you to use this as a practice in your life or use to invite more mindfulness into your life. What I found was that physically what it does is mindfulness helps relieve stress, it lowers blood pressure, reduces chronic pain, improves sleep, helps with digestive problems, strengthens your immunity, and helps you sleep. Obviously, it doesn't do it 100%, but it's part of a whole wellness profile that if you're looking to feel better physically, mindfulness is definitely something you should think about focusing more on in your life. The second way that mindfulness is important, the why of it, is that it helps your mental health. It helps decrease depression, it helps decrease anxiety, and it helps you manage and notice your emotions. Those are really important. In my psychotherapy practice, I actually spend a lot of time on mindfulness with my clients, most especially when they're suffering from any kind of anxiety and fearfulness, because mindfulness just really is a way of toning down the anxiety and becoming more present. And it really helps release that anxiety. I do that with people with anxiety, with depression, and as I was just talking about just an ability to get in touch with your emotions. Mindfulness can help with that. The third why of mindfulness is how it helps in your cognition, in your thoughts. It provides more mental clarity, and mindfulness provides an ability or an increase in an ability to focus. So that's super important when we're having any kind of difficulties around the thoughts that we're having. Mindfulness can help us move off of those difficult thoughts and more into a more centered, balanced kind of idea. Now we know the why, and I hope you focus or reflect on those to see why you might want to be more mindful, because the more you are connected to that why of being mindful, you're going to be more likely to engage in it. I have actually a lot of mindfulness techniques and practices that I'm going to discuss with you now. And it might feel like a lot when I bring and talk about all of these different ways. I don't mean that you should do all of them. What I encourage you to do is listen to this podcast more than once and come back to hearing different ideas and just seeing which one fits for you. Which one would you like to try? There might be some that you already do. There might be some that you used to do that you want to re-embrace, or some new ideas that you want to bring into your life. So just consider that as I talk about all of these mindfulness practices. Also, if you're interested, I'll have the transcript on my blog, feedyoursoulunlimited.com/blog will be this episode will be written out, so you can really go through all of these different techniques and get them in a written format. So that's one thing you can do. So here are some ideas, actually quite a few ideas for mindfulness. So one of the things I like to do is I like to practice mindfulness as part of my daily routines. And I don't do it all the time, but I do it some of the time. Let me tell you some of the times I do it. I like to practice mindfulness in the shower. I like to go into the shower, feel the water on my body, take a deep breath, feel the soap in my hands, feel myself cleaning my hair and my face. I really get present with it through the feeling of the water, through the feeling of the soap, through the heat of the water, also through the smells of the soap and the shampoo, then the kind of the tactileness that's going on. So it really engages a lot of my senses when I'm in the shower. So that's one of the things I do, is practice mindfulness during routine activities. The other thing I like to do, and I do it all the time, is a mindfulness technique that I do is when I'm in the grocery store, when I am standing in line, and most especially when I'm checking out, I will have a conversation with the person who's checking me out, and I will look them in the eye. And I found that that really grounds me and gets me centered into being present with that person, being present with what's going on. So those are two of my daily routines that I like to do. And I encourage you to see if there are any parts of your daily routine that you could just make more mindful. Another way to practice mindfulness is to just know that your mind will wander and to not worry about it, because if we overthink this, we're not really in mindfulness, right? It's really about just knowing that your mind will wander. It just is what happens. That's why we practice mindfulness, because we want to practice and get better at it. So just notice that it's wandered and bring the thoughts back to the present moment. I like to just take a deep breath and center myself into what's going on right now, and that really helps me bring my mind back into the present moment. Another idea is to keep your mindfulness practices short. I like to engage in mindfulness at various times during the day and break it into small chunks. It's not about being mindful the whole 24 hours of the day. That's really impossible. I don't know of anybody that can do this. But breaking it into short little chunks. I just told you, when I take a shower, I'm mindful. When I'm in the grocery store checking out, I'm mindful. I want to increase that more. When I've been sitting here getting ready for this podcast, I've been mindful to get up and walk around and to take a deep breath. And those are short periods of time where I'm more and more mindful. So just know that it doesn't have to be an extended period of time. Just a simple, short 30 seconds, minute that you spend on mindfulness is really important. And it then increases over time the amount of your mindfulness practice. What I like to also do is when you're waiting for something, like you're waiting for in the line, I was just talking about being in line in the grocery store, and it can be kind of a frustrating point in time because we want to move fast, we want to get through the line. Why is somebody taking so long in front of us? That's often what goes through my mind, is why are they taking so long? And that's really not a way to be mindful. And I want to practice more, and I want to encourage you is to, rather than focus on the frustration of being in line and how much time it's taking, is to take a deep breath. This can also be when you're driving your car and you're sitting at a stoplight. Let's say you really need to get to work quickly, but there's a stoplight. Taking a breath so that you're more mindful in that moment, more present in that moment, can really alleviate a lot of frustration and anger and anxiety that can come up. Those are some really great ways to make your mindful moment as you're waiting. Another mindfulness practice is to pick a prompt and pick something that when you see this certain item or when you do this certain task, that you take a mindful moment, such as I was thinking, like when you take a sip of water, just to sit there or stand with the water in your hand and notice how it feels holding on to it with your hand. Notice how it comes up to your mouth. And when you take a sip, how it feels going down your throat and what the flavor is. That's a great way to be mindful when you do something on a regular basis. I told you before, like, and this is too much information, I'm sure, but when I go into the restroom, I will practice deep breathing. It's just a time where I'm in there kind of taking care of business and I just take a deep breath. And that's pretty regularly what I do just to get myself more centered. And it's a moment that I have that I'm not doing anything else. And so I focus on being mindful in that moment. So those are some ideas for you that you could also start doing too. Another mindfulness technique is to focus on one thing at a time. We're going to talk further a little later about multitasking, but really, as you're considering mindfulness, we can't do two things at once. And when you're doing one task, do one task and just focus on that. It is a way to focus in on what it is. If I'm picking up this paper right here, I'm just picking up the paper and I'm paying attention to that. So focus on one task, one thing that you're doing, and pay attention to that. Something else you can do is just slow down. I don't know about you, but I tend to move a little too quickly and I try and get things done really fast. And it's not really to my benefit. And it leads me to feel more anxious and upset and worried because I'm doing things so fast. And what I find is actually that's when I often make mistakes and don't do things right, or I might spill something or something might get ruined because I'm doing something too fast. A way of being mindful is really a way of slowing down, taking that deep breath and just slowing down. So that's another idea. It's also good to start thinking about spending time, or actually not think about, but do, is spend time outside. I find consistently that whenever we're outside in nature, at a park, in the woods, at the mountains, at the beach, that it's really a mindful moment. I think everybody feels better when they're in any one of those situations. I'll notice that people will talk about relaxing over the weekend and they'll talk then about going outside, outdoors somewhere to do something. And that is a natural way to embrace more mindfulness. So make it your business to go out once a day or at least once a week on your weekend to go out and just be in nature, because that is a very mindful spot to be in. Another thing you can do for mindfulness is train your mind to pay attention to what's going on around you. Be aware of what's in front of you. I'm sitting here with my podcast. It's a little bit warm, so I can feel that. I feel my feet on the floor. I can feel my arms on the table in front of me. My breath is coming because I'm speaking. Obviously, I'm watching the little bars go up and down as I'm talking on my podcast. So I have a lot of things that I can see, but it's all paying attention to what's in front of me right now. This is another thing you can do when you're paying attention around movement, around walking, running, swimming, paying attention to what's going on in that moment. The other thing to do is to do that around food, is to pay attention to the food. How is it tasting? How does it feel? I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but this is a nice starting spot for you to think about, how can I pay more attention when I'm eating? I am a psychotherapist by training, and I work with actually a lot of couples. And one of the things that happen with couples is we often don't listen to each other. And this is another mindfulness technique, is to listen deeply to another. I find when people come in and talk to me, it's partly because they don't feel listened to by the various people in their lives. A mindfulness technique is to listen to somebody, look at them, give them your full attention, like really look them in the eye and listen to what they have to say. I like the idea of reflective listening, where you listen to what they've said and you reflect back what you've heard and ask them if that was what they had said. And then you can really get more of a deeper connection into what they're saying. What we tend to do is we tend to listen, quote unquote, and then we have our next opinion or idea about what we're going to say, and we don't fully listen to what the other person is saying. Being mindful around relationships and listening to somebody involves that deep listening without any need or intention of saying anything back or having my next best thought stated. Another mindfulness technique is when we're being practicing more of our mindfulness, or being more mindful, we can check in more with our emotions. This is super helpful with or our core concept, which is one of them is around eating. When we're emotional, I'm sorry, when it's around emotions, when we're being more mindful, when we're listening inside of our body, that is the chance where we can go inside of ourselves and ask, how am I feeling emotionally? I want to listen to how I'm feeling in order to know what's going on with me and then see what those emotions are trying to tell me. This is where there's that connection between mindfulness and emotions, because as you're being more mindful, you can listen more to your emotions. And as you listen more to your emotions, you're more mindful. So they really do merge together. Another area that helps you be more mindful is to check in with your body. So that's that physical component. This is where the physical and the mindfulness come into play. How is your body feeling? Take a scan from head to toe and check in with how your body's feeling. Are your shoulders hurting? Are you scrunching up your forehead? Are you clenching your fists? Is your tummy feeling upset? Do your feet feel warm? Being in touch with all of those bodily sensations gives you guidance or gives you a clue about what might be going on. And then you can act in a way that will help your body out. This is really important, again, when we're talking about food issues, because food can get mixed up when we're not present in our body. We can eat more because we're not paying attention to how our body feels with that food. Another piece of that physical component is drinking water. I think it's really important. Actually, nutritionists, doctors say this all the time. Drinking water often during the day really strengthens and connects you to your body. That's what we're talking about, is we're practicing mindfulness techniques that really solidify and get us back in touch with our body. And drinking water certainly does that. It also has all those good things going on. It hydrates your body and it gives you more energy to do all the things that you need to do. I also like with mindfulness, and I've been doing this more lately, is listening to music. And there's a lot of music that disconnects me from my body, but there's also a lot of music that just makes me feel more centered and more present. Often for me, I don't know about for you, but it brings me back to another time or a feeling of another time, which I'm not disconnected from this present moment, but there's this connection to my feelings in my body and that music, and it's super lovely, and it really fills me with joy. And I would encourage you to see how music might be something that could reconnect you in with that mindfulness practice. Some techniques that we can use for mindfulness and just for general overall wellness are journaling to release the chatter in your head. This works really well if you're having trouble with your mindfulness practice because you're having a lot of thoughts come in. If your thoughts are just overwhelming your mind, journaling and doing more of a conscious journaling of all the thoughts in your head can be really helpful to let those thoughts go so that you then can take that breath and be more connected inside of your body. Another form of journaling is to do what's called a gratitude journal. And that is a daily list of 5 things that you're grateful for. I like challenging myself for every day I have to write 5 different things that I'm grateful for. And it then becomes really a test of my ability to see what I'm really grateful for. It makes me feel more in touch with my life and in touch with other people when I can focus on gratitude. Also, when we're focusing on gratitude, we're just naturally bringing more joy into our lives, which is good all the way around. Another mindfulness technique is to breathe deeply. This is one I think I've talked about in every podcast we've had on mindfulness, is the breath. And I think the breath is really that spot of where we can get more and more mindful. So I like to take 3 deep breaths throughout the day. I have, so it's like in and out and in and out. And I've done this with you before. So just go back to those other podcasts and they discuss them more in depth. What one of my clients does, which I thought was fascinating, was she sets a timer each day or for each hour she has a little gong that goes off on her phone. It reminds her to take a deep breath. I love that idea because it's very purposeful. It's automatic, and it gets me back in touch with my body, in touch with my breath, when sometimes I hold my breath and don't realize that I could be more mindful in that moment. So that's one really great technique, is to set a timer every hour for a gong or a buzz to go off, and it reminds you to just take a deep breath. When we're looking at mindfulness, there's a lot of ways we can do it. One is to notice where your mind is going and gently bring it back to the present. So if you notice your mind is going way into the future or way into the past, I notice this happens for me a lot when I do meditation. When I do meditation, often thoughts will come in about all the other things going on in my life rather than me just sitting there and being quiet. And this is a great technique to just gently go, okay, let's come back to the present moment. Let me feel my bottom sitting down. Let me feel my feet on the floor. Let me feel my hands and they're tingly, and feel my shoulders relaxing. That helps me come back to the present moment by noticing when my mind is going somewhere else and just gently bringing it back. As we said before, that it's really a gentle bringing back without judgment or condemnation, just a gentle, let's come back to the present. I talked earlier about getting tasks done or just doing one task at a time. I want to go back into that just a little bit more because I think we get caught up in the idea that we need to multitask. What I know, and I hope you know this too, is that really we cannot multitask. I think I tell myself that I can, but I never get anything done really well when I multitask. When we're multitasking, we're really also not being present with the moment because we're focusing from here to there, and nothing gets our full on attention. And actually, studies have shown that multitasking doesn't help us get anything done faster. And it actually makes us take longer to get these tasks done. What's interesting is that what the studies also show is that we think we're getting it done faster. We think it's helping, but in actuality, when it's been researched, we don't get things done faster. I like using a mindfulness app. I use Insight Timer. It's a free app. There's a paid version also. It has a gong that I can set for me to be more mindful and to be more present. There's also guided meditations on the Insight Timer. There are lots of different free apps that are around that you can use, but I recommend this a lot because often people tell me they don't know what to do. And I think having somebody walk you through, which they do these on like Insight Timer app, they'll walk you through how to breathe and how to center your mind in a way that's really helpful. And it helps break through the thought of, I can't get this done. So that's one of the things that I recommend. I'll put it in the show notes, a link to Insight Timer, because it's the one I like. There are plenty of others, actually. If you put them in the put them down in the comments, I'd love to hear what apps you use for any type of meditation or mindfulness. And what that brings me to then, when we're talking about mindfulness and how to practice more techniques, one of the things I think you need to think about is, how often do you use a device like an iPod, an iPad, any kind of phone, your computer? And our use and continual use of these devices actually can make us distracted from ourselves. And I want you to consider one of your doables to be put down the device. Put it down for a specific amount of time. I've had friends who talk about putting it down for a day and how much centered they are and how much more they get done in their lives. Also, I strongly encourage you to turn off the alerts off your phone so that it's not beeping and buzzing all the time. So when you come back to your phone, you're there to look at it, but it's not beeping at you all the time, which really takes us off of whatever we're doing in the present moment. The other thing you can do with your device is you can just turn it off and be silent with yourself, like literally turn the whole thing off. That can be super helpful. I haven't gone into, or I did a little bit about eating and mindlessness in eating, but here's some tips for mindfulness while you're eating. One of the things I highly recommend is no television. Turn off the computer and don't read, but focus on eating and chewing your food slowly and really getting a sense of the taste and what's going on with the food inside of your body. It's really a mindfulness act to eat. Eating is mindfulness in and of itself. And I encourage you to really embrace that opportunity.
Hi, everyone. This is Kim, and my book is out. Feed Your Soul, Nourish Your Life, a 6-step system to peace with food is live. I recommend you get it. It has all my 6 components of feeding your soul, as well as my own story. Pick it up now. You can find it on my website at feedyoursoulunlimited.com. Thanks.
As we do on every podcast, I have a doable for you. And there was more I had written down for what the mindfulness techniques are. There were more than I could even share on this podcast. Maybe I'll have to do another day of mindfulness technique. But what I encourage you to do this week, because our doable is always something that we can get done during the week, I really recommend that you practice one of these mindfulness techniques to really embrace it for the week. Try a couple of them. Like I said, I'm going to put this in a blog that you can read and you can see more of them. But it could be that you choose to drink water daily and feel the water go through your body. It could be that you decide to slow down and have deliberate action. It could be that you decide to keep the television off while you're eating. Any one of those are really valuable mindfulness techniques that you can do that will help you get more connected to your body. We're going to be talking more about mindfulness, all the other core ideas that are surrounded with feeding our souls. There's a lot to go over. I am so glad that you've been here. I look forward to talking with you then. Make this a great week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on the Feed Your Soul with Kim podcast. We come to you every Monday with fresh new ideas to help you end emotional eating and put food in its proper place as nourishment. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and review it and let us know what you think. Thank you for joining us.